I'm in an Orthodox relationship and was wondering if there are certain roles for men and certain roles for women when it comes to leading and decision making and listening to each other. Yes, absolutely. And you can find and see that in the lives of the saints. Studying the lives of the saints, studying the scriptures, studying the writings of the saints about the roles of men and women, having a spiritual father, having a spiritual mother, for instance, in the monasteries, or virtuous mothers and fathers, is going to be extremely edifying to you, for you to understand the roles of men and women. Uh, that is a big part of the culture and the ethos of married life in the Orthodox Church. And it really presupposes that we're following, just like we follow the Holy Fathers, we follow the saints, we need to follow examples of virtuous married men and women that have come down to us. And that's a huge problem for us in the West, where many of us are converts from families that were never Christian or never Orthodox, and we're carrying baggage from dysfunctional or even very problematic families or relationships. Many of us are carrying wounds. And so this is a huge issue that is really important for us to have models, to have examples to which we follow. And so we don't have them in our lives. We don't have mothers and fathers or grandmothers and grandfathers that can show us what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a virtuous. Of course, you can see images of this again in the scriptures, but then we're going to turn toward the lives of the saints in lieu of those living examples in our own life. And we're going to see that God has arranged things beautifully. And so much of what has been presented to us in the 20th century is not only a departure from this, but an inversion, and a satanic inversion. So much of what modern feminism is started out, of course, many times these movements start out with some basis and some good intentions and some important goals that are correcting ills and so forth. But clearly it has become, in our days, a major tool for the unraveling of the family, the destruction of femininity, and so much more. And so we have to decisively divest ourselves from those models and those ideas and turn wholeheartedly to Christ and the saints and try to imitate them and their virtue. So there are certain roles for men, of course, that's going to be basically put, because this is not something we can go into, it's a whole class or two, but basically the man is going to take the role of a protector, of a provider, and of a nurturer for his wife, and the wife is going to be the role of a helper. Now, a helper does not mean a slave or a servant. It's quite the opposite. It means somebody who's working side by side. It's from the side the woman was created. It does not show submission in the sense of worth, but it's submission in the sense of a role. Just like we submit ourselves to Christ, we submit ourselves to our spiritual father or bishop. So if St. Paul calls for us to submit ourselves to those who will give an account for our soul, our spiritual fathers and bishops. That does not mean a inequality in the sense of someone has those image of God and the other does not, or someone is given more grace, from the get-go, and the other is deprived of that. None of that is implied. It's in a role that we live, and there's a synergy, just like between God and man. There's a synergy between man and wife. It's very important that the man and the wife walk together, and that's why they're called in Greek syzygi, or yoke mates in English, right? So, what's characteristic of the two animals, the two who are plowing the field, is that they have this yoke over both of their necks to keep them together, to walk together, to make progress together. And so it's very, very important that the husband and wife fulfilling their both roles, which are helpful to one another, which serve the greater good of the family, that they stay spiritually together, focused, and making progress. One cannot run far ahead of the other. There'll be problems in the marriage, or one who falls far behind the other, there'll be problems in the marriage. It's really important that they're as yoke mates, as sojourners, as co-strugglers, that they're both making progress, similar to progress in spiritual life, and fulfilling their roles is a big part of that, right? So caring for the wife, caring primarily for the children, and serving in the greater good of the family, and submitting in the end of the day, submitting in the big decisions to the husband, whereas the husband's giving his whole life in imitation of Christ for the wife and the family. So far more sacrifices demanded of the husband than the wife, really, and at the end of the day. Far more humility in the larger picture, in the sense that to lay down one's life as Christ did for the church. That's the imagery that St. Paul gives us. So just a few thoughts on that. I don't know what else you're looking for, but one could talk for a long time on the particulars, and maybe that's something we should do.